I ended up making a living, a really good living, creating magazines for people. Other people can write for magazines, I can't. Other people can design magazines, I can't. But I can create the template for a magazine, and I can make it both understandable, but also changeable so that it's never dull, but you always know what you're reading. And that's the trick. I gathered a whole bunch of people to my house that worked for the radio station, and we sat in my living room and we drank way too much bad red wine. And I still have the original page of all the ideas. And then at the end of the day, there was something really beautiful about the triangle, the circle, and the square, so VOX. Working on some of the most expensive magazines in the world, they were really no different than Vox, just on better paper with way more money. But it was the same general idea.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 172. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. If you're into the show, I'd love if you could subscribe, leave a review, just do something. That'd be appreciated. Today's guest, I thank Alex, our mutual friend, for teeing this up. I sent an email to her. I'm like, you know anybody cool that'd be a great guest? And right away, she put your name up. So please name and who you are. I
am Shelley Youngblut, and boy, professionally, I'm the CEO and creative ringleader of WordFest. Existentially, I am curious, and geographically, I'm a Calgarian.
Amazing. Like I just told you, I don't do any research on people, so I know that they're either an artist, entrepreneur, or athlete, which is kind of how they fit this structure of the show. But before you showed up, I just quickly typed your name, and I'm like, oh. So
is that a good?
Yeah, totally.
Or is that a, what the heck did I get myself into? But I actually can hit all three of those because I am involved in the arts in Calgary. Yep. I'm an entrepreneurial person, and I worked with athletes for 10 years at ESPN.
Should we just stop this now and just call you the trifecta? And
you can. Yeah, exactly. I'm the winning ticket.
Exactly. But yeah, no, the was like, oh, because there's just, it seemed like a very interesting background, and that's what I enjoy about these shows. Finding interesting people that just have this kind of. It's not like a engineer, doctor, lawyer. That's like a very straight path. Just quickly reading them, it seems like there's going to be some flow to this, which
there'll be a little flow. Yeah,
gets me excited. So, have you seen one of these?
I have.
Oh, okay, great. I'm surprised.
I wouldn't do it if I hadn't seen it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So walk this thing back. Where you grew up, how you grew up, parents, siblings, job, school.
Sure.
All the way back, and then we'll just kind of like,
love it.
I'll tug at you at kind of where you are today.
Okay. So I was born in one of the most Canadian of places, Medicine Hat, Alberta. And my signature memory, which I don't really remember, but I've carried it with me as this existential terror, is that I was playing on the front step with a rattlesnake, which is basically the pet of, or the animal of Medicine Hat. And neighbors freaked out, and it was brutally murdered in front of me. And so to this day, I can't look at an S encyclopedia. It is a profound terror. And I had a therapist once who tried to talk me out of it. And I kept thinking, no, I think it's really good that we have these archetypal feelings and dread, and that we hold on to that. I didn't want to make friends with the snake.
Fascinating.
See, I told you.
And that's why when I gave you the, I was like, this is what, there's potential this thing goes.
Sure. And then we ended up in Calgary briefly, and then in Winnipeg. And Winnipeg is a fantastic place to be from. I don't know if you know about all of the arts people in Winnipeg, all of the cool people in Winnipeg. There's actually this huge diaspora of creative people from the West who are moving to Winnipeg because it's affordable and they can all hang out together. But I wasn't there for that reason. I was there because my mom was a nurse and my dad was a salesman. I remember, I guess the biggest thing I can remember about Winnipeg is that I was happy. And I was an organizer. I remember like organizing all the kids into like fake Olympics, and I would get prizes for people. And, you know, I don't know why I wanted to do that. I think it was I just really wanted to be popular, but I had to create experiences for other people. And that sort of carried over for the rest of my life.
How old were you when you got to Winnipeg?
I was 5 or 6.
Okay.
And then we left and came to Calgary when I was 11. And we moved to Lake Bonavista. So I'm a Bonavista girl. And that always means something. You know, you say you're from Beaverbrook or you're from Francis or you're from, you know, Queen Elizabeth. But no, I was a Bonavista girl. And it was like the man-made lake.
Yeah.
And I think what I took away from being part of the man-made lake community was this sense of magic, that the place that you lived didn't have to just be like housing tracts, because the lake was glorious. And then every Christmas they would put up these magical lights and these storybook characters. So there was Jack and Jill and Cinderella, and you would toboggan down the hill and try not to die. But that was it was a cool place to be from.
And it was almost on like the outskirts.
Yeah.
Like it was. It's like I'm born and raised Calgary, and so Bonavista, I remember going to play hockey there, and it was always like from my place in Strathcona to drive all the way to Lake Bonavista. You're like, oh, we're going to like the other side of the city.
Totally.
But it took like 10 minutes because it was just straight
down the Cloud Trail.
Yeah.
But what was funny about it was adults didn't. They were either North Calgarians or they were South Calgarians, and they never crossed a certain line. And for my family, it was the Stampeder Motor Inn. So I never went to downtown Calgary at all. Like the Calgary Tower was this looming beacon off in the distance, but my Calgary ended at the Stampeder Motor Inn. And they had a really famous smorgasbord where it was all you could eat and it was every conceivable thing. And I remember as a young girl trying to strategize the smorgasbord, which was that I was going to beat it. And so it was like, forget about the Jell-O salad, anything healthy, I went right for the seafood. Like if there was a lobster tail, I was eating 8 of them.
Seafood in Calgary.
But I think part of what makes I'm trying to think of like the thread here, and the thread is that I always wanted things to be more than they were. So the idea that it wasn't just, going for dinner, that it was a smorgasbord. And it wasn't just that you went tobogganing. You went tobogganing through storybook land with all these sparkly lights. I always liked the idea that life could be more.
When you were growing up, was arts a part of your world, or was it sports, or was it school? Like, what kind of had your attention as a youngster, or all the above?
I loved to learn. So I was the kid that had to sit on my hands because I kept putting my hand up all the time. And it wasn't that I wanted to prove anything. I just wanted to be part of the conversation. I was just genuinely excited by the idea of knowledge. And then I was a really bookish girl. So I used to bite my nails, and my parents would bribe me by giving me a book. And so, again, for me, it was like giving up something that I loved to do, which was to bite my nails. A book was the prize. And so I'd always valued books in a weird way. But at the same time that all this was happening, my father was an athlete. My father played for the Edmonton Eskimos. He could do anything. And he was coaching a lot of kids in sports. So if you had been the same age as me and you had grown up in Bonavista, my father would have been your coach in hockey, football, lacrosse, and baseball.
No way.
And so I was not athletically gifted, but I loved it. And so I was always around it. And so it was like books and sports. And then I started reading, there's a guy named Stan Fischler, who might be way before your time, but he was based out of New York, and he wrote all the As Told To hockey biographies.
Okay.
And there was a hockey biography by Derek Sanderson. And Derek Sanderson was the sexiest hockey player in the world at a time when hockey players were anything but sexy.
No way.
So Derek Sanderson, he played for the Boston Bruins. He was a really good Canadian guy. He had this Fu Manchu mustache, and his nickname was Turk, and his number was number 16, and he played hard. He was the guy that helped Bobby Orr score.
Okay.
So he ended up forming the first nightclub in New York City that was really sexy. And it was called Bachelors 3, and it was him, Joe Namath, and Wilt Chamberlain.
No way.
Can you believe it?
No way.
This hockey player from Canada, Derek Sanderson.
Crazy.
And so for me, it was like taking my love of story, my love of sports, and then adding this sort of 70s glamour to it. And strangely enough, that memory, I ended up using it professionally later on in my life, but it was like this genuine memory I had.
Did it just click? Like, did you know in the moment that it just like clicked, that there's just going to be this, like this memory would have, or this thing would have such an impact on you? Did you know in the moment, you're like, oh, this feels right?
That's a really good question because I don't think I was strategic at all. I think I was just trying to figure out what I cared about. And I knew that I cared about Derek Sanderson.
So I got to find this book. I don't like.
It's called, are you ready? It's called I Gotta Be Me. And I can recite whole chapters, but there was this chapter where he's talking about the difference between chicks and women and broads. And again, this is so politically incorrect, and I know it's politically incorrect, but I'm like 10 and I'm reading this and I'm like, well, I certainly don't want to be a broad, but I think being a chick is way more fun than being a woman. So anyway, it's funny how these little things can kind of just get into your head.
Wild. The idea around sport, like just being around the house with your dad, was it, you just watch? Was there any like conversation around sport, or was you just kind of watch and listen and just be around the sport world? Is that how you kind of found your interest in sport?
So not only was my father, he ended up quitting the Eskimos because you could make more money working in the oil patch.
Yeah.
So that was just the way it was back then. But my entire family, my extended family, they were Eskimo fans and they were Rough Rider fans and they were Stampeder fans. And my second cousin ended up being the president of the Calgary Stampeders. My grandparents were around. They used to have all the football players come over to the house for dinner.
No way.
So we were just always around athletes.
Yeah.
And then I think the reason I like sports so much is because you have to play the game, right? Like you don't know who's going to win. I mean, there wouldn't be a sports gambling industry if we did know who's going to win. And so it was always this idea that you had to play the game through. And that's exciting, right? And that it was this sort of dramatic thing. And again, what's so fascinating about sports is, to this day, when I look at what I do in the world, it's pregame, game, postgame. There has to be, the build-up, then the thing, and then how do you understand the thing that just happened?
I've never heard it put like that. Like to actually, whether it's events or whatever it is, but I've never heard it translated into that sport analogy. Because the sport, I get that one, but I've never thought about transferring it into, like when I think about this, quickly my brain went to, how do I take that analogy into this like podcast world, right? It's so... And I do it, but I've never thought about it's that same kind of structure.
I think that I'm not the best at many, many, many things, but I'm really good at connecting dots. And so, I can take something like my sports, my approach to sports, and I can translate that into other things. And I think that's the thing that sort of took me through my career, is that I could always bring in the unexpected, but have it be really resonant. So you'd never heard of Derek Sanderson, but when I was describing Bachelors 3, you got excited, right? Like they wore fur coats and they had these Cadillacs, and, everything about them was larger than life and exciting. And so, but very few people can translate that into a sports magazine the way that I could. Yeah.
And I got excited because, you take a Canadian hockey player, put him beside those two names, you're like, that sounds wild, which is, right away my wheels were turning. I had this like visual of what this thing actually was.
Oh, yeah.
Junior high school?
Yeah, not the best time for somebody like me. So I was quite tall. I was quite thin.
Yep.
I was extraordinarily nearsighted. I had bad teeth, and I cared too deeply. And so I was a very, very awkward teenager. But I always, we can talk about this, I always had great style. Like I knew clothes, and I had this Cinderella idea that if I just got the right outfit, my entire life would change, which isn't true, but it's still fun to go shopping.
And where'd the style come from? Was it somebody around the house? Was it your mom or your dad, or was it like magazines, or how'd you figure out the eye?
So the magazines are starting to cut. And again, I'm a magazine person. If you said, what is the medium that I, although I like radio too, and obviously I like live events, but magazines were my first love. And they were just always around. So, and again, so politically incorrect that my father read Playboy. And he would leave them out everywhere. And I, of course, would pick them up. And I just found them utterly delightful. And I had no conception of women being objectified. I just thought they were alive. And there was something kind of verboten and kind of forbidden about like Playboy After Dark, and they would be these interviews with all these people. So I remember John Lennon had an interview, Malcolm X had an interview, and I'm like 9 years old, and I'm gobbling this up. It just, again, it seemed really sexy and alive. So there was my dad's Playboys, and then my mother read Cosmopolitan magazine, which was basically the female version of Playboy. And I just loved it. I again, gobbled it up. And I can close my eyes right now and I can see whole covers.
Still.
Yeah, still. And I knew again, the same way that guys know about sports, I knew about magazine people. So I know who the makeup artists were, who the hairdressers were, who the models were, who the writers were, who the editors were. Like, this was just this world that I so desperately wanted to be a part of. So when I was about 9 or 10, I decided that I wanted to tell stories, but packaged like a magazine. And so I wanted to go to live in New York and be a magazine editor.
Could you connect all those dots at a young age to realize that could be a thing, and that thing would be in New York? Like, you could put all those together at that age.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, I had absolutely no business doing any of it.
Yeah.
I mean, my family was not wealthy. We were not connected. My mother, as a nurse, had the only degree in our family. So, most people who go into the magazine business, at least when I did, they were scions. They were the sons and daughters of famous people, rich people, or magazine stars.
Yeah.
So it was a really hard world to break into. But at that point, I was trying to get, through junior high. So I hadn't quite figured that out. And then in junior high, again, because I was such a nerdy girl, but I had these strong passions. I was so into punk. Like, it was the explosion of what was going on in England. And I got into it through Rolling Stone magazine. But then there was this magazine called Trouser Press that came out of the States, then NME. And so I was obsessed with music and how music could, you could be rebellious, you could be different. I can't tell you how many times I listened to Darkness on the Edge of Town, how many times I listened to Patti Smith's Horses. I mean, it was all of it. I remember a girlfriend went to England and came back with a copy that must have cost her like $100 of U2's Boy, long before U2 broke in North America. And so now I have like music, I have magazines, and I'm starting to feel like I could belong somewhere.
As I'm obviously hearing this for the first time, having a tough time as a youngster, but then having these strong feelings in these other areas. Like, it's such a, you can say you want to do this thing, which takes confidence and this internal push. And then in the real world, like day to day, you're like, it's a little different, a little off. It's such an interesting idea. Did you wrestle with it? Like, was it two lives, or was it?
Oh, that's such a good. Okay, so one of the things I've realized is that I like having two lives. I like having a public life, and I like having a private, secret life. Yep. And so, yeah, of course, there was this. But again, my public life was no fun. So my secret life was really interesting, at least to me. And then, these are the things about the influences that come into your life. So because I was a Bonavista Vista girl, I went to EP Scarlet. And at the time that I was at EP Scarlet, Bruce McCullough from Kids in the Hall was a little bit older than me. But Shadowy Man on a Shadowy Planet, they had a band called Buick McCain. And so there was this strong thing. And then there were two people named HC and Hutch. HC ended up starting HC, the club, on 11th. And then Hutch is now one of the world's best independent record producers. Again, they spun records in the Quad. And so, they were there. And so it started to feel like, oh yeah, I could be, I'm at least plugged in with other people. And they were really good. Like, they weren't just posers. They were, Bruce is as funny a human being as you will ever meet. Hutch is, again, is as good a record producer as you can imagine. And, we were all contemporaries. And there was a guy named Joel Anderson who ended up in a band called Neo A4, and then he played with a lot of different bands, but he won a drum kit. And I remember they announced it over the PA system, and it was Nancy Wilson from Heart who said that he'd won this drum kit. And so there was just this sense that it was possible. And then at the same time, I had to get a job, and I got a job at the age of 12. I filed books at the Chinook Public Library,
Amazing.
which, again, you won't remember this, but at one point in Chinook, there was a library opposite the bowling alley, and it was insane because all the men would come down and smoke and read the newspaper while their wives were shopping upstairs. And then every now and then you'd hear the crash of the bowling pins.
12.
12. And I remember I had to file the books, and I would get bored. And so I would file them forwards and backwards. I would file them by color, and I would time myself. I was such a nerd.
Wow. Where does that come from? Like, where does that, like, that kind of passion come from around these, you know, like you said, these nerdy subjects? Like,
Well, if you're there,
I guess
you might as well figure out a way to make it
Yeah.
special.
yeah.
But what was really fun was I was so young, and I kept that job for 8 years.
Wow.
And the librarians that were like the actual librarians, they used to have tea time. And we would go to the back, and we would have tea, and we'd have shortbread and tea, and then they would read aloud from the dirty books.
Amazing.
And and these were the books that we used to keep them at the back, and we would make the patrons come and ask for them. So it was like, I want to read The Joy of Sex, but they'd have to come up and ask for it.
Make them squirm in front of you?
Yeah, librarians are way more Machiavellian than you can imagine. And I remember that instead of doing the really hardcore parts, they would go ... And so it was always like, oh yeah, now comes the really, really, salacious stuff. And it was a ... So you're thinking like it's just, filing books and story time. Oh no. Once again, librarians.
The outside person would never know.
Never know. Not in a million years.
It's like a trade secret that you just...
But again, so I was around a lot of books. And I think part of what that reinforced for me, because I was physically handling the books, and I still, I'm a frustrated graphic designer. So to me, it's the look and the feel of the object that's loaded with all this information. And I feel that way about album covers. I could look at an album cover forever.
Your high school crew, it sounded like a very, like the first word, like magical. Those kind of characters that were operating at very high levels, creative. It seems rare. Like, it seems like, especially in that era too. Like when I went to high school just down the street, and I went to school with Paul Spence, Dave Lawrence, Foo Bar guys, bunch of musicians gone there. And when I think back, I'm like, it was such an eclectic group. Everyone comes from all over the city to this like melting pot at a young age. What did it feel like? Did you pick up on that energy around the high school with these high performers, or did it give you confidence knowing that there was a different way to do things?
I guess it was more just that I was exposed to things that were really interesting. I would never have found a lot of these records on my own.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, there's just this sense of originality that was really important to me. It was actually, strangely enough, I have very little contact with anybody I went to high school with. It's university that was where I kind of found my tribe, the people that I felt the most akin to, and they're still in my life today.
Did you know what you wanted coming out of high school? Did you have a plan, vision? Was it still to get to New York? And were you on that path and you were going to make decisions to get there?
I had I don't want to go into it, but I had a not great family life. And so the first thing I needed to do was get out of the house and get out of the house without my life falling apart. That was was just to survive and get myself out of a bad situation and be able to call my own shots. And then I had really good marks, but we didn't have any money and I didn't have any family backing. And so U of C was the only place I could go. But I was determined I was going to go to university. And I just took an English degree because, you're a bookish girl who loves to read. What else are you going to do? So I got an English degree. And then in my second year, I said to myself, you are becoming truly weird. You need to join a club. And I am so not a joiner. And so I remember walking around the university Mac Hall on club day, and it was like the young conservatives, and I could have hung out with Danielle Smith and Stephen Harper and all those people, and it was like, no. Then it was, the environmentalists, and it was like way too earnest for me. And I just kept walking around the room going, none of this works. And then I go downstairs, and there's this huge poster, black and white, of like a guy that looks like he's from like 18th century France, which he was. And it turned out his name is Alfred Jarry, and he was like a philosopher who started a movement called pataphysics. And he used to walk a lobster around Paris on a leash. Like they were surrealists and quite nutty. Anyway, there were two guys who looked very cool sitting underneath the big poster of Alfred Jarry. And I said, hi. And they said, hi. And I said, what do I have to do to be part of your club? And they said, nothing. And I said, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. And basically, it was the Calgary Institute de Pataphysique. Honestly, you did nothing, but they were a front for the radio station. They were a front for CJSW.
No way.
And so they said, what do you listen to in music? And I told them what I was listening to, and it must have passed some kind of bar,
Cool
but
bar.
not that high a bar, because I got the Friday morning at 7:30 shift.
On air?
On air.
No way.
Yeah. So then I wound up on air at CJSW, and it was the CJSW people, because it was the people who were all freaks and geeks, and we just all came together over a love of music. And it was a really exciting time at the radio station where we'd just gotten our FM license. Grant Burns, who's still on air at CJSW all these years later. Grant was there. There was a guy named Bill Reynolds, who's now teaching magazine journalism in Toronto. It was just this amazing crew of true originals. And the quality of music was just like through the roof. But it was at a time when Simple Minds were coming through and Iggy Pop was coming through, and a great time to be part of the radio station. So out of that, again, I was always a little half in and half out, and I couldn't figure out how to be all the way in. And so I thought, what can I do? What can I bring to the table? And I thought, I'll create a magazine. And so I created my first magazine at the radio station.
Which is the connection between English and doing radio.
Yeah. So instead of doing my honors thesis, I created a magazine.
The music piece like really intrigues me. I was a DJ in town for 9 years. I know a handful of characters on CJSW. What did that feel like? And I've never been on radio. The idea of whatever the booth looks like, I've seen pictures of the kind of the old school one who's in a bunker, it looked like.
Oh, not only was it in a bunker, but I was part of the crew that stapled the foam to the wall, the egg carton foam, just so that we could have some sense of a sound booth.
So it wasn't just bouncing all over.
Oh yeah.
What did that feel like? So when you're either super passionate about a single or whatever it is, and you're talking into a mic, and like you're introducing the city potentially to a new track, like was that like electric? Like, does it give you goosebumps? Like what was going through your head when you were playing music on the radio?
I would think it was more trying to figure out why I was doing it. Like what did I want people to feel or think? Like what gift did I want to give them? Which is a strange way to look at it. It was never about ego for me. It was always about sharing and about connection. And so I think, the exciting part for me was taking a band that I loved and then just playing the shit out of it, so that people would start to say, oh, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, or oh God, what was Sid Straw? What was her band's name? It's so funny. My brain isn't the way it used to be. I can't remember things as much because I think there's maybe too many things in there. But I would get these songs that I would just be like completely obsessed with, and want other people to hear them. So it was more like a sense of just finding connection and being. I'm not great in party situations. I'm not great in crowds. I'm really good one-on-one, and I'm really good when I think no one's listening.
Which, being in that bunker,
is just so
no eyes.
At 7:30 in the morning on a Friday, trust me, no one at University of Calgary was listening. But there was something lovely about just sending stuff out into the void. It was really lovely.
Did that help you find your voice? Like just being able to talk about music, or like did it? With this like English background, you got to introduce the music and talk about it, and probably share the stories behind it. Did it help you not become an extrovert, but did it help you just be able to get things in and out of your head smoother?
So, most people who are in the writing world, that's the thing they grapple with, is to take what's in your head
Yeah.
and have it come out either through your mouth or through your pen or through your computer, like your fingers. And I'm a better speaker than I am a writer. It's a much easier from whoever my essential person is to come out. Writing, there's this weird block that happens. And so I find radio as a medium wonderful. I find that it's the most revealing of the mediums. Like, you can't disguise who you are when it's just your voice. And there was something really lovely about like listening to people in the dark. Like, I listened to Brave New Waves, Brent Bambury's show when I'd be in bed at night, way before there were podcasts or anything. We would just listen to, whatever we could find that was alternative.
Yep.
And I just loved the sound of somebody sharing in the dark.
Fascinating. Did it what the music scene look like in Calgary back then?
Oh, it was so great. Okay.
So
Yeah. No. So here's the thing, right? Is I got really lucky. You were talking about, trying to find those pockets of cool people.
Yeah.
When I was in my early 20s, there were only maybe 150 people.
Yeah.
But it was the best 150 people you can imagine. And so we had all the ingredients for a true scene. We had a radio station. We had a magazine, which was Vox, which I created. There was another magazine called Last Issue that was more of a general interest magazine. We had galleries. So there was off-center, center. So you had like an alternative gallery. Then you had a club. And the most important thing was you had a live venue, and it was called 10-Foot Henry. And
Seriously?
you don't know this story. I'm so glad I get to share this story with you. So a group of Calgarians went off to Amsterdam. And while they were in Amsterdam, they saw all of these really cool underground clubs. And they came back to Calgary and said, if we don't find ourselves a version of this, then we're not going to go on living. And so there was a thing called the Funk Plaza Disco. And it was down in the west end of downtown. And it had been like a disco, like an after-hours disco. They bought the lease and they turned it into 10-Foot Henry. And it was a club. And everybody played at this club. William Burroughs came to this club. Eugene Chadbourne, Laurie Anderson didn't. It was crazy, the people that showed up. And then at this point, all of the different sort of punk bands and alternative music bands were getting their start, including the Calgary versions of them. And so it became, you'd go to CJSW, you'd go on the air. You would go to 10-Foot Henry and play. You'd be written up in Vox. You'd be sleeping on the people's couches. And then if you were arty, because everybody was arty, you'd be cross-pollinating into the gallery. There was also a dance magazine at that point. And because of that dance magazine, the dancers that were now being taken from the U.S. to come to U of C to teach, they were all heavily into jazz. And so DJD got created out of that. Blake O'Brien bought the Uptown. And now we had a movie. We had a cinema. We had our own movie theater. And all of it mattered. Like, all of it added up. And then out of that came One Yellow Rabbit came out of that. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And any of those people, Peter Mahler is a graphic artist. He has a press called Egg Press. We had our own printing press. We had somebody in Peter, and there was an artist named Martin Goderna, and they were doing the most incredible posters. And if you go into 10-Foot Henry, the restaurant now, and that's the actual Henry that was outside of 10-Foot Henry.
Okay.
And you go into the bathrooms, you're going to see the R&B keepers and the animal slaves and I'm trying to remember all the names, all the bands, and you can see all the band posters that Peter created.
Wild.
So it was like a really lucky thing because, I'm reading about punk music and Trouser Press. I've got my own version of Trouser Press in Calgary, and we're doing the kind of coverage that's just as good. So when you say, did that give me a sense of confidence? Yeah, at 20, we were doing things on par with anybody anywhere in the world.
I like to think I have like a half decent understanding of this city and kind of some of the roots, but this is like blowing my mind right now. It sounds like a little New York, like
It was.
all these Like that kind of vibe, that kind of energy. Like I'm
A
thinking
little
like,
New York, a little Amsterdam, a little Berlin, you know, and then a little London. So it was, and because, you know, it's so funny because I lived in the States for 10 years and Americans don't understand England. They do not understand anything cultural that comes out of Britain, whereas Calgarians do. And then the other piece of this was the Plaza Theater, and all of the movies that were coming into the Plaza. So I probably have a better understanding of film, of alternative film from the sort of 80s than anybody that grew up in London or New York or Los Angeles, because there was nothing else to do in Calgary except go to the movies. And so we saw all of those movies when they first came out.
sounds spectacular.
It was. It was really, really. And the thing is, it's not that I believe that this will go in cycles. I believe that there will be another version of this. It might be happening right now, and I'm just too old to know about it. But it did happen then.
Which is really fascinating because I give this a little bit of thought. So when my club life was 99 to 2010.
Yeah.
Pretty cool time. Kind of before cell phones. There's still culture in different rooms. You had to go to different rooms, different nights to hear the music, and like the same kind of community would be there because they're not on their phones. So like I have a feeling of what it was, like what you kind of experienced. Yours was obviously like way cooler.
No, it's just different. It was just a different time.
And so, but I think a little bit about this generation or the next generation. Is there enough like undiscovered things that those kind of communities will be created again? And maybe to your point, maybe I'm just too old and I don't know what's actually being created, but like your experience, my experience in the nightlife thing was like really, really cool. I just don't see it of what's happening right now.
I think that if you're in your 20s right now, or even in your like late teens, because I was certainly getting into clubs because again, that was the advantage of being tall, is I was into a lot of clubs when I was 14, 15, 16, because I really wanted to see the music.
Yeah.
No one is stopping you.
Yeah.
No one is going to give you the money. No one is going to give you the sweetheart deal. Nobody's going to pay your rent. But nobody can stop you from being creative, from creating your own world, your own especially now. Like, it was expensive to print Vox. And Grant, who was the publisher and I was the editor, Grant had contra deals all over town, which was like, add in Vox, he got his haircut, add in Vox, he got dinner, add in Vox, he bought a record. I mean, it was absolutely, you know, a barter situation back and forth. Just to, and so some of that you can see in, like, why are we sitting here in this room right now? Because of relationships. And, you know, Victor came out of the sort of the seeds of that scene, and look at the empire around us. Like, the refinery would not have happened without 10-Foot Henry. And the refinery wouldn't have happened without, or am I talking about the wrong club?
Republic.
Republic would not have happened without 10-Foot Henry. But there was also the refinery, and then there was a place called Lucifer's that was right down on First Street. And Lucifer's was insane. And it's where Loverboy came out of, and Bruce Allen made his bones there. Crazy. And that was, you know, this is back to my my working at Chinook Mall phase. There was a store called the Strawberry Experiment, and it was the best clothing store in the world. And they hired the most beautiful women in the world, and they had the best clothes in the world, and it was so glamorous. And I remember thinking at 12, if I could just get the right outfit, I could be like them. See, this Calgary's way, because, you know, and the thing about Calgary is, because we've always been so entrepreneurial and we have such a hard time staying within our own boundaries, like we think bigger than we are. Of course it's going to attract big dreamers.
Again, not knowing anything about you, have you written about this or like captured this? Have you written like a long form thing about these stories?
I've been collecting all these. This is my plan. I'm supposed to be writing a poker memoir, which we'll get into poker later. But part of the roots of the poker memoirs is this period.
This.
Yeah. You like it?
If this can be, I keep on thinking about like Studio 54.
It's very Studio 54.
And so as you're talking, like, this needs, and I don't read books, but the idea of getting this into something, just so people understand like where it's not where the culture started, but where this like music, clubs, the creativity, like this would be a fascinating,
Wow.
written, but I also like you on the mic telling these stories.
Thank you.
Cool. I think there's so many people like the music world, the club world, just all the creatives to actually have this kind of like North Star of how it started. I don't know. It's like, I feel like it could be that fuel that kind of starts that next phase of, and then it'll be the next cool thing. Like for people to understand this, it might give them energy to be creative and come up with the next thing.
Thank you. I think the other thing that was so, it's not just one of the things. This is the part too. There was the whole restaurant scene that was going on simultaneous to all of this. So you've got a guy named Witold Twardowski and all those restaurants, right? And, Mescalero, Mescal is all part of the same thing. But what I loved about all of it is it wasn't flat. Like Mescalero, they went to Mexico and they brought back huge doors and the knobs were important. Like every aesthetic detail mattered. And the same thing with like the Strawberry Experiment. Instead of it just being changing rooms, they were like Moroccan sultans' tents. And they had a koi pond. There was an actual koi pond in Chinook Mall. And the ads were fantastic. And then they had a male companion store called, are you ready for it? Lord Wolf.
This doesn't sound like our city. People have a lot of ideas of what this place is. This is like I love this place. Then I know how creative it is and the cool energy. But these stories are like, my mind is just like.
But you know what's so weird about it is like I was like just this nerdy teenager, but I paid attention. Like I saw it all. Kind of like with my nose pressed up against the glass, wishing I could be on the other side, but also scared to be on the other side. And so I might be romanticizing it a little, but there really was a koi pond. And there really was Mescalera. Yeah. And there really was a 10-foot Henry. Like all of these things happened. Yeah. Whoopi Goldberg came with her one-woman show and performed it in Off-Center Center, which was above, like it was on the sort of plus 15 level on 8th Avenue. Like it was crazy. It really did happen.
You've snuck this in a couple times, Vox. The idea of starting a magazine, was there somebody doing it where you could kind of pull the ideas or put this thing together? Like how do you, at that age, at that point in your life, how do you decide that a magazine is a good idea? And there's probably like some pretty big costs around it. Like how did it all click for you? Was it a natural to see the opportunity and go there? And was there any hesitation?
Well, the radio station had gotten its license. It was definitely trying to increase its profile in the community. Back then, you couldn't have music without music magazines. You couldn't have film without film magazines. You couldn't have fashion without fashion magazines. You couldn't have sports without sports magazines. You needed to have that thing that crystallized all of it. And so it just made sense that CJSW needed a program guide. And so that was the first thing, was to say, I really want to do a magazine, but you really need a program guide. So let's mash them up together. And then, I knew what a magazine looked like. I knew what a magazine felt like. And then I have that kind of brain where, and this is the part so I ended up making a really good living creating magazines for people. That's what I did. And so other people can write for magazines, I can't. Other people can design magazines, I can't. But I can create the template for a magazine and I can make it both understandable, but also changeable so that it's never dull, but you always know what you're reading. Yeah. And that's the trick. And so I remember I gathered a whole bunch of people to my house that worked for the radio station as DJs or volunteers. And then I always loved being around artists. And so all the kids that were at ACAD, because you need the graphic artists, right? You need the artists. Yep. And so I convinced them to join in, and we sat in my living room and we drank way too much bad red wine. And I still have the original page of all the ideas. Like what we would call it, what the departments were, what would be in it. Wow. And I still have all of it. And I have all the different things that we were going to call it. And then at the end of the day, there was something really beautiful about the triangle, the circle, and the square. So VOX. And then again, it was so funny how I've only been doing the same magazine my whole life. So working on some of the most expensive magazines in the world, They were really no different than Vox, just on better paper with way more money. But it was the same general idea. And it was great. And then I graduated and I ended up at the Banff Center, and they had a thing that was arts journalism, and you were supposed to go and learn how to be an art critic. And so I got in because of Vox. That's why they put me in there. And then we basically, the whole program was canceled after my year because we destroyed the program. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Because it was like I went in thinking I was going to be a Marxist feminist film critic, and I left having destroyed the program. So there you go. Yeah. But I got to spend, 6 months in Banff at the Banff Center, which was also life-changing.
How so? You say that like, yeah.
Because Banff, have you ever spent time up at the Banff Center?
Maybe as a youngster.
Yeah, it's Disneyland. It's
Okay.
Disneyland for artists. And so you have all of these, like, I'd imagined what it would be like to be amongst the most incredible international creatives.
Yeah.
Now suddenly I was living with them and eating with them and hanging out with them. The funny part about Banff Center is that nobody actually creates art. It's like too nice to be able to be artistic, but you get to absorb so much.
Were you at a point at that age where you were you able to like be in rooms with people and kind of converse, or were you be super shy, or like where were you in that?
No, I think the thing about me, and you can tell because we just sat down and we started talking, is if I'm here,
You're good.
I'm here.
Yeah.
But I get really freaked out thinking about coming here.
Yeah.
But you have to put yourself into these situations, and then I owe it to you to be the best I can be. So, but I think everybody, I don't care who you are, when between the ages of like 18 to 32, you are like one bad day away from a complete breakdown. Like, right? You are so fragile. Your grasp on yourself and your grasp on your place in the world is just like this, right?
So true. How did that experience change you? What path did it put you on after you experienced that?
Okay. So they brought in mentors, which is, again, you've probably had really good mentors. I think that's the thing that makes you loosen your grip of on the ledge is that somebody who's really accomplished sees something in you. They tap you on the shoulder and say, I see you. Yeah. And so at Banff, we had a woman came in, and her name was Ann Collins, and she was senior arts writer at Maclean's, and Maclean's back then was something. Yep. She'd also written books, and she looked like Angelica Houston, and she was just the embodiment of she was a magazine editor. She was the embodiment of everything I wanted to be. And she saw something in me, and we had to write these stories, and I wrote about my Barbie doll collection and how my Barbies were always hookers, which will come as no surprise to you based on my feelings about Bachelor's 3. And so the lead of my story, everybody else was writing about really high-minded things, and my lead was my Barbie dolls were always hookers. And Anne went, you're different.
Instantly. Having Vox like beside all this, was it like this perfect playground for you to kind of discover and be creative, and all of a sudden it's just like this giant body of work that you can point to, it's like you get into these interesting conversations, and if people do any research on you, they're like, oh my God, like there's this thing behind you. Interesting that did it help you?
Oh, but it opened all the early doors.
All of them.
So after Anne took me under her wing.
Okay, what'd she do? When you say that, what did she do for you?
She saw me. She just paid attention to me. She thought I was legitimate. And then I was dating a French-Canadian former national badminton player, sports.
Obviously.
And he was from Montreal. And so instead of going to Toronto like all my peers or to Vancouver like all my peers, I went to Montreal, which was nuts because I don't speak French. And I was really miserable. And I remember thinking, well, I have to go to Toronto, and now I'm going to have to find a job. And I'm going to have to start doing the thing where you throw your resume out there, you call everybody you know. And I moved to Toronto, as my bank account, like what my meager amount of money just started going down. And I've got whole pages of my journals from most of my 20s into my 30s. That is, the back is like how much money I'm starting the month out with and how much I might have at the end unless something happens. You must have those too, right? And you're just like, I've got nothing.
Oh yeah, the math is pretty simple.
Yeah. And it's like, wow. So I'm at the bottom of my ledger in Montreal, and I moved to Toronto, and the Globe and Mail was starting a magazine division. And Anne at that point had taken over a job at the Globe and Mail, and she told the person who was hiring at this magazine, she said, look at Shelley. And so there were 1,000 people who applied for this job, this junior job at this magazine startup. And I remember it was Vox, because I'd started a music magazine that took me out of the list of all these people that had just gone to J school.
Yep.
And I remember talking to the guy that hired me, and he said, why should I hire you? And I said, because I'd care. And he took a chance on me. And that was my biggest lucky break.
Crazy.
And so Anne made that possible. And then Anne did me the best gift of all. She had a baby, and she was living in this apartment. So again, this is the story of creative people, right? It's like our jobs, our partners, and our apartments, right? Like, can you win at the apartment game? And Anne had this apartment that was on Queen Street West, between John Street and Beverly Street. And it was on the 3rd floor. It had a rooftop deck, and it was $300 a month. And when she moved out, she gave me that apartment. Jesus. And so I was right in the heart of downtown Toronto, and Much Music moved in right across the street.
Like,
yeah, it was like, that was like a playground.
Jesus.
Sorry.
It's not being lucky though, right? Like you created something, you gained experiences, you kind of honed your craft quietly, or just, and then all of a sudden these things start showing up, and you have the talent, the understanding to execute.
Yeah. And I think, I've been thinking a lot about, because I've been working with a lot of younger people now, and I'm trying to figure out ways to help them achieve. And nobody told me anything. They just threw stuff at me. And what I used to do is I would take stories home at night, something that somebody else was working on. I would take the first draft, I would take the final draft, I would go home at night, and I would compare them. And I would think to myself, why did they make this change? What was the goal of this? How did the writer get from here to here? So I was almost self-studying after hours. And then the other thing I did, which was huge for me, was the Metropolitan Library, the research library in Toronto, had all of these back issues of old magazines. And I would go in and I would just pore over back issues of magazines, and in particular New York Magazine during its heyday. And there was a period where New York Magazine was the greatest magazine in the world. And I would look at stories, and I would look at how they did it, and I would look at bylines. It was almost like I was reading myself into that world. So that when I had a chance to be in that world, when I had a chance to do the same kind of work, I had a really solid grounding in what had been accomplished, like what was excellence. And so I was in the discussion. I knew the language, and I knew the high points. And it seemed like, I think if you're a musician, if you want to go back and listen to the greats, right? Like if you're gonna either follow their footsteps or twist things and find a different way at them, you have to know what was and respect what was.
As you're talking about this, I think about athletes. And so, what does it take to become a Olympian, pro, whatever? I've had a few of them say, like, it's all consuming. Like, it's the thing they think about when they're not doing the thing. They're deconstructing it. They're trying to learn. And so this is, it's very interesting that when you are talking to these youngsters now, and if you can share these stories with them, I think it's not one singular moment, but it's all this extra stuff that nobody sees, that probably had no idea of watching you kind of do your thing. Like, how is this? She's so lucky. Versus, there's a lot of work behind this.
Yeah, and the thing I've always liked, I like working on teams. I think magazines are a really collaborative thing, just like being in a band is a really collaborative thing, and exactly like being on a team is a collaborative thing. And so I often think when I'm assembling a team, I look at it from the point of view of either music or sports. So it's like you're going to be the guitar player, you're going to be the drummer. So you have your own thing, because I think everybody needs their own thing that they can just own. But then you have to, maybe you're going to share songwriting with somebody, or you're going to share vocals or whatever. And the same thing on a team. Everybody plays to position, but together, wow. And then if you really want to screw things up, you can be like Travis Kelce and throw the pass, right? Instead of just catching. Now you're, and so I always delight in that kind of, like, you have to really know what you're doing to be able to mess around. But it's really wonderful when a team gels to see that. And the fact that you're part of a team.
When you start getting into the business and you start building your team, is it based on, like, how do you build a team that's going to operate at a high level? Is it intuition? Is it experiences? Are you just dead reading shitty resumes and making decisions? Like, how do you assemble your teams?
So when you do the Myers-Briggs thing?
Fuck.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so off the charts intuitive. Like, it's a joke. So for me to follow any kind of a process that is a standardized process is just anathema to me. I can't. So I very much, the way that I hire, or the way that I want to work with people, is I hear about you. I see something in you.
Yep.
And then we have a conversation. And then I sort of test you out a little bit more. I might look at your portfolio, and then I bring you into a group conversation with other people you're going to work with.
Yep.
And I used to ask people two questions. One was their favorite movie, and the other was their favorite movie drama and their favorite movie comedy. So what's your favorite movie drama?
Like I told you, I don't consume anything.
Okay, so the answer is The Godfather. If you answer The Godfather, you could have gotten a job at ESPN the magazine or with me. And then I'm a little looser on the comedy, but A Fish Called Wanda never hurts. But it's funny how, because I'm really looking for chemistry.
Yeah.
And then I've learned now that I actually, sometimes if I have a fault, and I have many, but one of my faults is I see the best in you.
Yeah.
Way more than you will ever see in yourself. And sometimes I'm disappointed that maybe you're not ready to be that best version, or maybe my best version of you isn't your best version of you.
Yeah.
And so I can sometimes be disappointed by people because I think I see too much in them.
Interesting.
And then there are people who just endlessly delight me. And I never let them go. Alex, for example, our friend Alex Kingcott is somebody that I met immediately, and I saw it in her, and all I wanted to do was be around her.
Which is like the perfect segue, the intuition piece. How'd you figure it out? When did you figure it out? When did you realize it was your superpower versus not understanding what it was?
Well, I'm in the alchemy business, right? I'm in the dot connecting business.
Yep.
So if you don't have intuition,
Right.
you're hooped. Like you might as well just give it up and go be a copy editor. This is what I do, and thank God. And the one thing I always had was that the ability to be creative and see things other people didn't, and see, like build something new.
Yeah.
Now, you do not want to hire me to take care of a legacy thing. Like if you have something that's going really well, like your podcast, you do not want me coming in to your podcast because you've got it. You know exactly what you're doing. Whereas I'm the person you bring in if the podcast isn't working.
Yep.
Or you don't even want a podcast at all. You want the next thing. What's post podcast. That's when you bring me in. And actually, I'll give you a really good example of, because I really like this example. So I'm working at ESPN, and they send me to Canton, Ohio, to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which I have to tell you is the best Hall of Fame of all of the sports Hall of Fames, because it's super, super small town.
Yeah.
And it's not glitzy or glamorous at all. But while I was in Canton, because I was in Canton, Ohio, I decided I was going to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is the opposite of it. Have you been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? It's in
Is it in Cleveland?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been.
Because it's cool, right?
My biggest memory of that is the MJ kind of wing of it. That's kind of the thing that I remember the most, but yeah.
So I go in and I'm walking around the exhibits, and I love the fact that it's all like memorabilia, which reminded me of the Football Hall of Fame, because the Football Hall of Fame is also memorabilia. And I'm looking at the different memorabilias, and at that point, I decided that we should create a new section at ESPN, the magazine. And I get to Jim Morrison's memorabilia. And there's Jim Morrison's report card from when he was in grade 3. And basically, if you read that report card, it was everything you ever needed to know about Jim Morrison in the doors. Like, show me the boy at 7, I'll show you the man at 33. And I took that away from me, and I created a section in ESPN, the magazine, called When They Were Next, Before They Were Next. And I basically went to athletes' parents and said, give me all the memorabilia. Show me all the childhood stuff. And so I did Tony Hawk that way. And I did Phil Mickelson, the golfer. And Phil Mickelson, his birth announcement was a baby in diapers holding a golf club. His parents gave me the letter he wrote when he ran away from home, saying, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Mickelson." And then he said, I had to run away because you wouldn't let me play golf. Your sad son, Philip. It's all who they are. But that's how the dot connecting happened.
Yeah. Did you know right away when you figured this concept out?
I knew it was going to be brilliant. And I knew one of the reasons I knew it was going to work is because there's always going to be an obstacle. There's always going to be a no. And so my job is to figure out how to get around the no. And getting athletes to say anything interesting is impossible. They are not thinkers. They are doers. Their art form is what they do on the field.
Yeah.
They are not going to tell you anything. Only the goalies can talk. They're the only members of the team. Goalies can talk. Catchers can talk. But the rest of them, they can't talk. And so you're constantly trying to figure out how to get something fresh on these guys. And so I knew that was a way in. And I knew that no parent would deny me their favorite child, their kids' memories. Like, they would always want to, because everybody looks good when you're a kid.
For sure.
So it was like a really good idea. I liked how it came about. I liked it was so visual. And it was also based on Harper's Magazine used to do like found memos and found things. And it was like this idea of finding something, this tangible thing. And so, all of it is around the idea of, what do I need to do to get you to care about an idea or about a person or about a show, about a record, about a game? What triggers, what things in my toolbox do I need to put together to delight you and intrigue you and get you to want to know more?
It's like half psychology, right?
Oh, very much so.
Like, it's like this.
It's seduction too.
Yeah.
It's really saying to you, stop everything. You have to know this.
Like, bait them into it, and then they're like, "Oh my God!"
But then you have to deliver.
Yeah.
Like, you can't false
good.
promise.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it has to be a really satisfying experience, whatever it is.
Yeah. Fascinating. Before you got to ESPN, your tour in Canada, is that kind of where you kind of got your legs?
So I left the Globe and Mail because I got poached to be the editor of a up-and-coming magazine called T.O. So there was Toronto Life, that was kind of like the Avenue magazine of Toronto.
Yep.
Then there was Toronto Magazine at the Globe and Mail, which was more the establishment magazine that was really literary. And then T.O. was supposed to be the young up-and-comer magazine. And so they hired me, and I lasted a year. And we did the most amazing things. And I met the most amazing people. And it was like ridiculously ambitious, the stuff we pulled off. And it was really great. But the owner of the magazine was really the editor of the magazine, not me. And I didn't really understand that my job was to fulfill his vision of the magazine. And so he fired me. And then I got hired by this fascinating woman who sent me to Africa. And it was the time of Live Aid, so Bob Geldof, and Canadians were really interested in Africa. And so it was a magazine all about Africa. And I spent time in Zimbabwe and Mozambique and South Africa. And that was really wild too.
The conversation on getting fired.
Yeah, I can have, because I've been fired twice.
How old were you when you got fired the first time?
First time I was 20. God, do you think I'd remember all of it now?
You got a lot going on.
No. It was like crushing. It was totally, it was destroying. 27?
Ish.
26, 27?
Yep.
The first time, yeah.
You already answered it, but it was devastating.
Oh, God.
Because you were, it sounds, not knowing all
I was doing a great job.
And at different levels and for a long enough time, it sounded like you were you knew what was going on. You were a high performer. What was your move when you got fired? How'd you react? Like when you get pushed into a corner, what'd you do?
Well, you're so shocked, right? Like you just can't believe this has happened. I remember sitting in a playground with one of the writers from the magazine, and the two of us just on these swings talking about it. And then one by one, the writers, the photographers, the illustrators, they all rallied around me. And then I did my little calculation in the back of my journal and figured out how much money I had and realized I better get myself some gigs. And so the Africa magazine happened. But then I started Much Music. Decided because all they did was copy what was going on at MTV.
Yeah.
And so there was I can't remember, was it called Remote Control? It was like a game show that they had that was like a sexy sidekick and then the game show, and it was all music trivia. So I got an audition to be the sexy sidekick. I know you're thinking, how did that happen? As did I. I did not become the sexy sidekick, but I did end up writing the questions for the game show. Yeah, so I wrote game show questions. And then I started, I had written a story about Blue Rodeo, and Blue Rodeo was just getting their start. And their manager loved me, and so he was trying to convince me to come work to join their management team and become part of Blue Rodeo's management team. But I didn't want to do that. I knew I wanted to stay in magazines. And then I ended up, Club Monaco had a magazine, and I got myself assigned to go write about cool things in England for Club Monaco.
Like random, like obscure, like these sounds like very super niche, very
well, this was the time of magazines. Like everybody was starting a magazine, and then what would happen was they'd start the magazine, they'd run out of money, and they'd fold.
Right.
And so it was like a good time, not a long time. So it didn't really hurt you that you hadn't been at a because nobody was at magazines for forever. And yeah, the Club Monaco magazine was fabulous because it enabled me to go and talk to one of my heroes, this guy named Neville Brody. And Neville Brody was the art director of The Face, which was the seminal intersection between style, culture, and music that came. And there was a whole exhibit recently in London. It was all the face covers. Extraordinary. I'll show you a picture of it. It was just extraordinary. And he was just this graphic design genius who I loved. And so I got to talk to him much the way that you and I are talking about magazines and fashion and culture. And you have these conversations with these people, and even though they're here and you're here, you're at least you're in the same room having the same conversation. And you know that what you love, they love, and you're starting to feel less alone.
Like a little inner validation. Just like what gets you going.
Bingo.
Is there's something there.
Yeah. And then the Globe decided they wanted to start a magazine for Western Canada, and so I got hired. Even though I'd quit the Globe, they hired me back, and I moved to Vancouver. And I ended up working on a magazine called West that had editions. There was a Vancouver edition, a Victoria edition, an Edmonton edition, a Calgary edition, a Regina edition, and a Winnipeg edition. And it was a really, really ambitious magazine. And the woman who'd been the art director at TO followed me out to West. So the two of us were reunited. I ended up working with a guy who ended up becoming one of the art directors of Entertainment Weekly and lived in New York with me. That was amazing. And then they folded West. And at the same time that we were working on West, Susan and I had this idea that there should be a magazine for women in their 20s and 30s that was interesting. And so we developed a prototype for a magazine, and instead of just taking it to Canadians, we took it to Time Inc. and Hearst. We went right to the top. We thought there's no point in messing around.
Take your swing?
We took a big swing. And it was really good. I mean, that's the key thing, is it was really good, but it was nuts. But that they'd even take meetings with us, but they did. And we ended up with Time Inc. It was either us or this magazine by this really rich girl, and they went with the magazine by the really rich girl. It lasted one issue and lost $1 million. But Hearst heard about this magazine, and they took us under their wing, and we got really far with Hearst. And Yeah, the magazine was amazing. You could look at it today and go, it's still great. Like it was so good and so strong. Basically, the tagline was, "There's more to her head than her hair," and it was like traveling in the third world as a woman. It was a story about the world's perennially pissed off, like insurrectionists all over the world. But it was also, we talked about, don't hate me because I'm beautiful, and it was like Evan Dando and all these like really pretty musicians. Like everything, it had a little twist to the whole thing. You would have really liked it. So they went with Marie Claire instead. So we were like the runner-up. But they hired me to go work on ESPN. So that's how I ended up at ESPN. And the way that I got my job was I wrote literally a list that said the top 10 reasons why you should hire me, very David Letterman-esque. And without even meeting me, the editor-in-chief told me to fly to New York and go work for him.
No way.
But I won a green card in a lottery. So that's the lucky piece. Okay, so now I'm in New York.
As you're talking about these magazines, the one story that had this like weird like sense of fear, and it was like, how do you know there's enough stories out there to like crush a magazine for a duration of time?
Oh wow, that's the one thing I'm never afraid of. There's always a story.
But
it's you have to craft the magazine in such a way that it can take the stories. How do you know that there's going to be a podcast 178?
Which is interesting, because lately I've been thinking about it. And so,
But then there comes a moment where magazines should die.
Yeah.
And either they reinvent themselves or they die.
Right.
And so, yeah, there comes a point where the stories have been told, at least through that voice.
Yep.
And a magazine is really just a voice and a perspective. And you have to create a magazine that is broad enough to go for a long time, but not so broad that it becomes irrelevant. And everybody's magazine.
Right. And that's what you're really good at.
It's how I made my living.
So New York City.
Oh my God.
Does it even, either when you land there or when you're done there, does it even make sense that you got there and that this opportunity was a reality? When I hear the story I'm like, wow, this is like wild. But like New York seems like just like way out there, especially ESPN, like the biggest of the big. Like,
well, that's a whole story in and of itself. So I arrived in New York, and another art director. I've always made really good friends with my art directors, and an art director that I was working with in Vancouver, not the one who I did the prototype with. Her name's Susan Casey. Susan became the art director of Outside Magazine. It was her idea to send John Krakauer to Everest for Into Thin Air. Susan's a former Olympic swimmer.
jeez.
So she's like the perfect partner for someone like me.
Yeah.
After Outside Magazine, she became the editor-in-chief of O Magazine, so Oprah's magazine. Then she became an editor-at-large at Time Inc. Now Susan is the world's leading expert on the ocean, and she's a best-selling author. Her most famous book, which you have to read, is called The Wave, and it's the story of big wave surfing all over the world. And only Susan could have written this book. Yeah, I'm so proud of Susan.
Wow.
So I was the junior partner in that relationship. But Paul Rolofs, who was an art director that I worked with in Vancouver, he got hired by Garden Design Magazine and Saveur Magazine, that were these two niche magazines. And the two of us moved to New York together. And we lived at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, which is where Joan Didion stayed and Sylvia Plath stayed. It's like famous. There's even a book about the Barbizon Hotel for Women. And so Paul is like, I think Paul's adopted, but I've always thought he was some kind of like Russian prince. Like everything just kind of falls on Paul. And we ended up in this terraced apartment that was right out of like a 1950s New York movie. It was crazy. And I would go off to ESPN, and I remember walking down Fifth Avenue. There's nothing like that feeling of being in New York with a purpose. It was so exciting. So the reason I got hired This wasn't ESPN the magazine. This was the startup to ESPN the magazine. And we needed $100 million to launch this magazine. Wow. And nobody had it, and nobody was willing to risk it. So Hearst, which is, one of the oldest, most reputable magazine publishing companies in the world, they had bought, just as a whim, a stake in this startup TV network out of Connecticut called the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network. And it was nothing. Like, it was this fly-by-night thing out of Bristol, Connecticut. But they bought this teeny tiny stake in it because they had cable networks. Turned into the most lucrative thing they ever owned. And so they owned the ESPN brand as far as magazines were concerned, and they wanted to see if they could launch a magazine. And so we sat in a room, this crazy, Gary Honig, who is the editor-in-chief, he did not hire me because I belonged there. He was really quirky. So if you think about, do you ever see Welcome Back, Kotter?
Yep.
He looked just like Gabe Kaplan, and we were all like what were they called, the hedgehogs, or the, anyway, we were like the crazy kids, the misfits. It was like the Breakfast Club for magazines. And so everybody who was there shouldn't have been there. But it was this great collection of people, and we created fake magazines for 5 years, waiting for somebody to launch us.
No way.
Yes, way.
5 years.
5 years. We started putting them out as one-off issues. I was the hockey editor of Hockey 96.
Obviously.
But, it was really funny because it really enabled all of us to do things that were, Sports Illustrated was the big guy.
Yep.
And we were the anti-Sports Illustrated. But what is the anti-Sports Illustrated? And so trying to figure out what we were that wasn't just a younger version of Sports Illustrated, but made sense. And one of the things that I decided was that I would be the liaison between the network and the magazine. The magazine guys didn't think much of the TV, and I kept thinking, we're only existing because people love the TV. And so I was the one who went up to Bristol, which meant that I got to know all of the Sports Center guys. So you want to ask me anything about any of the Sports Center guys of a certain generation? I know them all. I worked with all of them, and I went to the ESPN Christmas party, which was a bacchanalia of epic proportions. You have no idea what those Christmas parties were like.
Did all this fit on you?
Yeah.
It just felt like, like you said, purpose in New York is it's a vibe.
But then at the same time, after a year and a half of this, Gary realized that we might not get any money. And so Gary taught me a huge lesson here, but this is what was going on was every now and then Hearst would realize they had a bunch of crazy people working on fake magazines on the 5th floor of the Good Housekeeping building, and they wanted to fire us all. And Gary would just not do it and hope that they'd forget about it and then decide they wanted a magazine for ESPN again and just hire us all back. But he just never fired us. And so he kept us on, but then he started to feel bad about me, and he kept thinking, she has no one, she has no family, she has no money, I better give her a future. And so a friend of his was looking for an executive editor at 17 magazine, and Gary sent me to go see this person, and she hired me, and I became the executive editor of 17 magazine, which did not fit well on me.
Crazy.
Because it was like, I was not the 17 girl, I was the sassy girl.
Where was it? Where was home office?
Oh God, it was on 3rd, on the east side. 3rd, and but what was crazy was on my 3rd issue, we were one floor below the Israeli Ministry of Defense, and there were bomb threats that came in. And so the Mossad comes in and ends up doing security, and we ended up the editor and I sent everybody else home, and we ended up working in this bomb-threated building, and there were like armed like tanks and like military on the main floor, and my mother's seeing it on the nightly news going, what are you doing?
Just going to work.
Just going to work.
Do you have a book yet?
No, I don't have a book. But here's what I can tell you about my 17 days is I was brought in to make 17 appropriate for, cool young women based on the magazine prototype that I'd done. That was what got me this gig.
Yep.
Before the woman who I was working for, the woman before that, her name was Midge. but her name wasn't really Midge. And Midge had been Midge had been the editor of 17 for like 40 years. But before Midge was Midge at 17, Midge was Sister Mary something. She was a nun.
Wow.
And she had gone blind and wrote a book about it because she got her sight back after a vision from God. And she's in the elevators of Condé Nast, and Alexander Lieberman, who's the very famous creative director of Condé Nast, says basically to his assistant, he sees her on TV, and then he goes to his assistant, get me that nun. They get him the nun. She's in the elevator with him, and he goes, do something about that nun. And so they turned her into Midge Richardson. She married this really famous Playboy tennis player, and she became the editor-in-chief of 17. But there was no sex in 17. It was just basically the magazine your mother wanted you to read. Whereas I realized, because when I was 17, I was reading Vogue. Like, I was reading Esquire. Like, you read aspirationally. And so I got brought in, and we did stories on human branding, babysitter true tales about what babysitters really did when they were watching the kids. Like, it was very different.
Jesus. And obviously the audience wanted to hear it.
It was a much better magazine. But I was brought in to primarily oversee the 50th anniversary issue. And so this is one of the highlights of my life. I got to sit in a closet with all the back issues of 17 magazine. 17 magazine did the first story on the Who. 17 magazine. I mean, it was like everybody, and it was so beautiful. So all of that girl who sat in the Toronto Reference Library and looked at old magazines, now not only was I being paid to do it, but I was paid to repackage it into a special anniversary issue. And the anniversary issue was really good.
Crazy.
But once again, my vision of the magazine was very strong.
Yep.
And my boss's vision of the magazine was different, and there wasn't a room for me. So Gary took me back. I got fired. That was my second firing. And I went back to ESPN. And then as we waited for more magazines to come off, like more fake magazines, waiting for more money, Gary loaned me out again. This time I got loaned out to Cosmopolitan. And I was tasked with creating a magazine called Cosmopolitan All About Men. And it was before the internet. So there was no such thing as like Tinder or anything like that. Like, there was email, but there was very, very early stages. It was 1997. And so I had to fill a whole magazine with ways of getting women to write men to date. I had to go find the men, package the stories, and have it actually be something. And it was newsstand only. And it's the best. I've got two things that were great that I've done. This was one of them.
No way.
So in Cosmo All About Men, it was the first time. So what does a woman really want in a man? What do we want? We want a great sense of humor. So it was the first time any of these people had ever been in a mainstream magazine. David Cross, Daily Show, Jon Stewart.
Okay.
David Cross, Jon Stewart, Dave Chappelle. I had them all for the first time, but in Cosmo All About Men. Conan O'Brien, and then to give the rebuttal, it was Janine Garofalo. That was my celebrity story. I did a thing called Real Guy Makeovers, where we took real guys and we made them over. There was a story that was based on, there was an old ad that was for Remington. It was like a shaving ad, and it was a guy in a white t-shirt, and he's standing in front of the mirror. And so I had a thing where it was a whole bunch of guys in white t-shirts standing in front of a mirror, and you had to figure out what their profession was.
Cool.
And so Rich Eisen is in that feature, the guy who's now NFL Rich Eisen. I convinced Rich to do it. I gave away a date with Alex Rodriguez.
Come on.
It was called, are you ready? Sweetheartless in Seattle. We got like 8,000 letters that we read every single one, and then we got to choose the girl who got to go on the date with Alex Rodriguez.
No way.
Isn't it nuts?
What year was this? 97?
1997.
Like, these are this like in 97. I was like 20-ish. Yeah, 20. So I had this vaguely vaguely, I'm like,
No, it was hilarious. And then it gets weirder and weirder and weirder. There was a story where I got 4 male writers to write essays about why they were unavailable, like what the problem was with them. Because normally they'll say, it's not you, it's me. Well, I wanted them to tell me exactly what it was about them. So it's like, I'm Mr. Profoundly Ambivalent. I'm the hunter. They were really great. And then I got the guy who created pop-up video
wait.
to pop up an answering machine message from a guy that he leaves on a woman he really likes answering machine. Like it was so different. It was so not Cosmo. And it sold a ton on the newsstand.
No way.
Yeah, way.
And that just, I'm sure when you get those metrics behind the ideas, you just like,
It was crazy.
you.
There was a story, and part of it we had no money. And I'm really good when we have no money. So this is the other thing is give me no money, and I can always figure out more creative ways around it. So the cover story was called 50 Great Guys from All 50 States. And it was like Mr. Alaska, Mr. Arizona, Mr. Indianapolis. We called the Indianapolis 500 and said, who's the nicest guy? And there was Tony Stewart, the NASCAR driver. So Tony Stewart's there with his P.O. box accepting a date. Are you liking it?
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
We had a story called The Sexiest Part of a Man's Body. And I literally would walk up to guys. We had we had 3 photo shoots that we were allowed to do for the magazine. And I remember being in California and I'd go into a restaurant and go, can you pull your pants down so I can see, that muscle between your thigh and your hip? And they do it, and then the next thing is you're going to be in a photo shoot, and I need you to establish a post office box. We had 2 weddings that came out of it.
No. It's not even to do that today. As you tell the stories, I'm like, could this happen today? Like, what would that even?
It would never happen today.
Happen, right?
And then, so I got to do that, and then I went back to ESPN. Anyway, those were the kinds of things that I got to work on. Then I got loaned out again. Nickelodeon at that point wanted to launch a magazine for parents of preschoolers. So it's a magazine for kids. They wanted it to be for both audiences, parents and little people who couldn't read. And so I worked on that magazine. And then, so all of this was happening while I was going back and forth between ESPN.
And the challenge of all these like loan outs, like you just up for the challenge? I
kind of really like the idea of really embracing one idea and then fully iterating it. When I was at Nickelodeon, it's in the same building as MTV. So now I've gone full circle and I'm actually in the MTV building in Times Square. And that's when Carson Daly was doing all of those big, everybody was coming in and there were all the screaming teenagers. So that was wild. Nickelodeon was like a comic book based entity. So kind of the daughter of or the son of Mad Magazine. So that was really cool to be in their offices. And then Blue's Clues. Do you remember Blue's Clues?
Loosely.
Okay, it was Steve and his felt friends, Blue, and all these different things. And I could go in and I could have him open up the drawer and show me all the little felt animals and like Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper and Baby Paprika. Wow. It was great. So you're in it, right?
Yeah.
Like now you have access
Yeah.
to everything. The cover of All About Man, I had this Olympic rower. He was the handsomest, nicest, best guy in the world. And the shot was a spectacular shot of him as an athlete. The editor of Cosmopolitan swooped in and took my cover away. And I ended up having to go to California and shoot a guy from Baywatch. Michael, what was his last name? Anyway, what I found out afterward, he was really preoccupied the whole time we were shooting. And I couldn't figure out why. I mean, he had abs, but he wasn't the most interesting person. But I mean, I didn't have a choice. But it turns out he was having an affair with Carolyn Bessette Kennedy at the time. And so the whole time I'm shooting him, he's on the phone with her. While she's married to JFK, who used to have lunch in the same places that I used to have lunch in downtown New York. So there's where the whole thing suddenly becomes absurd, right?
Completely. Do you, in the moment, you're in it and this is just the way it is.
And you're working so hard.
Yeah.
Like so hard. But I had the best apartment in Brooklyn Heights given to me by a senior writer at Vogue. So I scored on the apartment front.
Check.
And yeah, it was really interesting, the whole thing. And then working, on the magazine and on magazine things, I was sent to Las Vegas. At one point, I became the style editor of the magazine. And so I was dressing athletes for shoots, and I was sent to Las Vegas. I was supposed to be golfing with Allen Iverson. Like, this is nuts, right? Anyway, I'm in the Bellagio, and I'm feeling like I don't belong. And I'm downstairs in the kind of little cafeteria area at the Bellagio, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, Shaquille O'Neal walks in, and I'm like, oh God, I have to go talk to him. If I don't talk to him, my bosses are going to be really mad. And so I pulled out my business card, and I went up to the guy that was with him, and I said, I'm Shelley from ESPN. I'm the style editor. I don't want to bother Shaq. And he's like, no, you should come and sit with us. So we're standing in line, and I buy Shaq a chili dog and a Coke. We go over, and he's like the size of, I can't begin to tell you how big he is. Mm-hmm. He turns to me and he's like, no one has ever bought me anything since I was 12 years old. That's the first time somebody paid for me. Mm. I was like, I bought Shaq a chili dog. But I ended up through Shaq, I got his shoe. And we did a thing in the magazine where we literally shot the shoe at size and put it across the spread in the magazine so you could put your own foot on it and get a sense of how big was Shaq's shoe. So those are the kinds of things, right? That,
just, you could tell my mind's just like.
And then we ended up taking this idea, this story about Shaq having to pay for everybody, and we turned it into, there was an issue called The Money Issue, which was one of the best issues the magazine ever did. Mm. And there was a shot, and it was Ron Artest, who was a player for the Chicago Bulls, and we gathered everybody on his payroll and put them in the playground that he grew up in.
I saw that.
So that came out of Shaq's shoe.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Just what it is. As you're kind of cruising around having all these wild experiences, did you have a vision of what was next, or were you just making moves on your intuition, being in a spot, experiencing it, being open to something new, and then it just kind of kept on evolving? Or could you have charted this out?
No, I said yes to I always said yes. Yeah. If I was asked to do something, I always said yes. The only time I said no was at one point Gary had this idea that I was the only person who could get Deion Sanders to talk, and he wanted to send me to Texas to hang out with Deion Sanders, and I just knew that I would never get Deion Sanders to talk, and that if I did, I wouldn't be able to write it. So it was the writing that was always the no for me. The editing, the packaging, the figuring out how to do things that didn't involve writing, I was really good at. The writing part, which is probably, everybody wants to write, but I was surrounded by the world's best writers, and I knew that I couldn't do that. I was offered, every now and then I was offered jobs to be like the editor-in-chief of something, but it was always... After my time at 17, one of the things that I was watching, especially on the fashion side, was just this very narrow definition of what particularly a young woman should look like. Yep. And I just thought it was absolutely soul destroying. Like, I just kept thinking that we're breaking young women here. And I couldn't be a part of it. And so part of the reason why I was happy to be in sports was I thought that we couldn't do any harm in sports, that the games were just the games. But don't forget that I was around when Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire, the cyclist Lance Armstrong were pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. So the rot was starting to seep into sports too. But it was a safer space than fashion for somebody like me, and so I always stayed away from the fashion magazines. And there was always this fear that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't like the other, I wasn't like these guys were hardcore sports writers. But I did win. Are you ready? I won the NCAA basketball thing.
March Madness thing?
I won over the entire ESPN empire.
No way.
I won it.
No way. And with
total intuition.
No way.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Because, when you're Canadian, you go into these situations and guys know everything. They knew every player, every stat, all the hard stuff they knew. And I could never catch up. I didn't really care to know all the stats. But, you know, I remember at one point learning all the mascots and the colors. And then I sat down, again, this is sort of similar to what happened to me at the Globe and Mail when I was younger, was I knew nothing about the NBA, and I knew that Gary loved the NBA. And I was like, I better understand the NBA. So I sat down with a sports almanac and I went through the statistics. And I'm like looking at the statistics, trying to figure out a narrative that made sense to me. And then I start seeing this guy's name over and over against stats that mattered. Like I wanted basketball players that play basketball like a really hard hockey player. Moses Malone. And I went out to Gary and I said, who is this Moses Malone? And his eyes lit up and he's thinking, maybe I didn't make a mistake hiring this crazy Canadian. But isn't it funny how you come at things?
Yeah. That what takes creativity, right? A lot of people wouldn't figure that out.
I wrote a story for the college basketball issue called "Is It the Shorts?" And I had this theory that certain teams were winning because their coaches were more relaxed about the length of the shorts, and it was based on the Michigan players. And nobody, trust me, none of the guys that I worked with could see the logic of the shorts, but I could. Because if you're recruiting guys, are they going to wear the tiny little Bobby Knight shorts? No, they want the longest inseams possible. So you're going to get the more talent because you're allowing length in the shorts.
It's like Chris Webber era. Is that?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, all of those guys. So Tim Duncan, when I ended up becoming the style editor, because I had to find and athletes can't wear normal clothes. Everything has to be custom. And so you're really limited by who you can shoot, how you can shoot them, because they're not models either. And so I came up with this idea called teammate makeovers. And so I would have the teammates make each other over. And so my best one was Charles Oakley and Vince Carter.
When they were in Toronto?
Yeah.
What'd they do?
So the next thing you know is Oakley, instead of being in his suit, he's in like these hip hop things. And it was really fun. I got to spend a cup weekend with Jason Arnott when the Devils won. I got to go spend a whole weekend with him with the Stanley Cup.
Flashback name.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And the cup weekends are wild.
All the stories.
They always sleep with the cup. They always take the cup to bed. And the guy from the NHL Hall of Fame, the Hockey Hall of Fame with the white
hair.
Yeah, they stay in the house too, but they don't stay in the room.
Just close enough.
Just close enough. Well, that's true.
Gary?
Yes.
Gary seems to have like a fairly big impact on...
Well, what's fascinating was Gary's wife, Betsy. The way that I came into Gary's orbit was through Betsy. Betsy Carter, one of the great magazine editors of all time. She was the highest ranking woman at Esquire magazine. So when I was sitting in the Toronto Reference Library, I was reading things that Betsy was part of. I knew that there was this woman named Betsy Carter that was hanging out with all the cool guys. Then she started a magazine called New York Woman that was extraordinary. And so after Betsy lost her magazine, she became an advisor, and Time Inc. hired Betsy. And then when we didn't get our thing with Time Inc., Hearst hired her. And then when the whole thing fell apart, Betsy said, send Gary an email as to why he should hire you. And the two of them, they didn't have kids, and they ended up taking under their wing an entire, like 2 generations of magazine people. So I'm not the only one who would say I owe everything to the two of them. There's hundreds of us. And every single one of them are exceptional people. And then Gary, after ESPN, Derek Jeter, this is where athletes got smart. So Derek Jeter decided that why should Hearst or ESPN or Disney be making all the money? I'm going to start my own media conglomerate. And so Gary became his advisor.
No way.
Yeah. And a lot of the people that had worked at ESPN with me ended up going to work for the Players Tribune. Yeah, there you go.
Just gets like... where does your path take you after the ESPN loaning? And
what ended up happening was my art director at ESPN, his name was Peter. He was from Australia. He didn't know anything about sports, but he was really talented. He had a friend who worked as the art director at W Magazine, which was the big fashion magazine. And it was Peter's birthday. And Peter invited me. I was the only woman. And he invited Kirby, his friend, and Kirby invited this guy who was his friend named Michael, who was the business manager / the guy that was in charge of finding the money. And we end up at this place called Cafeteria in New York. It was January the 6th. So my January 6th was way more auspicious than the later January the 6th. We met at the door, and 5 months later we were pregnant. 11 months later, we were the parents of identical twin girls, and my whole life changed.
Just like that.
And all I wanted was, at that point, I really wanted to have a family, and it's really hard in New York to meet somebody who's not crazy, and Michael was not crazy, but our life, like my 2000, the year 2000 for me was insane. I went into it thinking I'm just going to be a great aunt. I'll devote myself to my job. And then literally our daughters were born on November 23rd. So that's how crazy my 2000 was. And so now suddenly I'm the parent of two twins, and we were living in near Union Square, just like Greenwich Village, Union Square. He had a rent-controlled apartment, which was fabulous. And it was the question of just, getting the babies born and then being like a mother. And then I started to freelance back at ESPN. But, we realized that if you live in New York and you're working at the kind of jobs that we had, you're going to pay someone to walk your dog. You're going to pay somebody to get your groceries. You're going to pay somebody to raise your kids. And I just didn't want to do that. So I started thinking about how to get back to Canada. And the then editor of the Calgary Herald started assigning me columns. So I started writing columns for the Calgary Herald. So I was writing, which was really strange. And I was working still on special issues for ESPN. And then we decided that we were going to move back to Canada. And Malcolm at the Calgary Herald, there was a hockey strike when the hockey strike happened. And they had all the money that they weren't spending on travel. And Malcolm didn't want to give it back, and he didn't want to lose it. So he decided to start a magazine in Calgary, and he asked me to do it. So I used one of the art directors I was working with at ESPN. In a weekend, we created the prototype for a magazine called Swerve. I moved back to Calgary. I presented it to the board at the Calgary Herald, knowing they were going to say no, because people always say no. And so because I knew they were going to say no, I created the magazine that I most wanted to read, not the magazine they thought they wanted. And they said yes. And we were publishing a weekly in 2 months. I had to create a team, and we started publishing a weekly in 2 months. I did that for 8 years. It was my most fun magazine.
Why?
Because it was completely mine.
Were you back in Calgary?
Yeah, so it was completely my vision. I had a great team of people that I was working with, and I was writing about my hometown in a way that had never been written about. So we had a mission. I wrote a Swervifesto, because I believe everything you do should have a mission. It shouldn't just be, it should have a purpose. And so the Swervifesto was that we were going to broaden the definition of Calgary. And we did. And to this day, I still get people coming up to me saying they miss it.
What year was that run? When did it start?
2004, and it stopped in 2013.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
That's a obviously I remember Swerve because it's it's kind of right in my when I was doing my thing out in the public. What did that, like those Calgary stories, was it just this, as you've told your story, it's such an interesting arc to that moment.
Yeah.
There's all this like madness and craziness and crazy opportunities and experiences. Then you get home and you create this thing that's,
and it was everything I'd learned.
Yeah.
And it was a miracle. Like, it was so, like, I was showing a couple of young people that work with me some issues, and they were just, their minds were blown. And as I was looking at it, it was like, how did we do that?
Yeah.
And we did it because we were fearless, because we were ready to fail. It didn't, like, we were really shooting high.
Yeah.
And because there was so much talent in Calgary. Just so much talent.
You still believe that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know it. I mean, I was working with people at ACAD, because it was that Vox thing, right? And it was like, we'll just go to ACAD. And I would ask people to come in and show me their portfolios. And then I would say, I love that. We're going to make a story out of that.
Cool.
And there was a guy named Mark Rimmer. Mark is now one of the top graphic designers in Calgary, but you would remember Mark because he was taking band photos.
Really?
The most
I remember the
amazing
name.
band photos. Matt Luckhurst, who was one of our interns. Matt and I actually created Groupon before Groupon, but the Calgary Herald wouldn't go for it. Except we didn't call it Groupon. We called it something else that was very funny and cheeky. But, you know, Matt ended up becoming the creative director of Airbnb.
Wow.
All the photographers, like there's Lauren Tamakis, another illustrator who's in New York right now, and she's just at the top of the illustration game. Like there is so much talent. And then, you know, from a photography point of view, George Weber, who is, you know, one of the best documentary photographers in the world, did some of his best work for Swerve. But, you know, you could just go through the list of all of the photographers in Calgary, all of the illustrators in Calgary, all of the writers in Calgary. And Swerve was a place where they could do their best work.
Wow. It's so, like, knowing about the magazine for all those years, from the outside, you don't know what actually goes into it, and like how high you get. Like, you guys are punching like way above your weight class coming out of Calgary. But as a Calgarian, you kind of take for granted of what it was.
Well, you should just feel like it was for smart, funny, curious people.
Yeah.
And what I used to love about it was you'd have 19-year-old guys and their 80-year-old grandmothers reading the same magazine. Maybe for different reasons, because we had really comprehensive listings, which you really need, right? Like, I don't know what's going on in Calgary. You need some place to find these things. But, you know, it was a good time, not a long time. The internet, the kind of death by a thousand cuts that media organizations do to themselves. I think that there were other ways forward, but corporate media doesn't always understand that. And you just wind up in a situation where we aren't connected in the same way. We're not reading the same things. We're so fragmented.
Yeah. The nightlife culture back then?
Well, don't forget I had 2 small babies, so I wasn't out and about. But
as a part of the as a part of the thread of that magazine, right? And consciously you made sure it was in there and that it had a spot. Obviously because of your background and like.
But also, you know, I remember my daughter just went for dinner at Klein Harris, and I was like, say hi to Christina, who's the owner of Klein Harris, who was Calgary's top bartender. We did cover stories about all the bartenders in Calgary.
Christina from the gallery?
No, Christina, her last name's Wong, and she's she was the bartender, but there was Franz, there was Steven, who was doing Ricardo's at one point, and then who else was there? Franz,
say hi to Christina.
Jimmy, and it was like all these sort of like artisanal cocktail people. They're still part of the culture. But, you know, it was like we did the restaurant people. I mean, one of my favorite stories at Swerve, there was a guy named Chris Kenchis, who's like a true original, as good a writer as you'll ever find. He ended up actually writing for ESPN. He wrote for Esquire after his time at Swerve. He had a drinking column. And the first story was about drinking at IKEA. And the truth is, you can get thrown out for being too drunk at IKEA.
Testing the bed.
But isn't that funny?
Totally.
So there is, like, when you talk about Calgary, the back page of Swerve magazine was driven by photographers. And the idea, it was called Our Town. And they would take a picture of something, and then we would find the story out behind it. And to this day, people come to me and say, that's in our town. I would, like, this is in our town. Like, this right now is in our town. And there's no place that's doing that.
Yeah. So cool. You said something a few minutes ago that was, you need a mission. How do you, knowing that, but obviously operating with like this superpower intuition, how do those two combine? Is it like without the mission, the intuition is a little wild and kind of hectic, and the mission kind of anchors you somewhere? I found, as soon as you said that, I was like, that's an interesting, to say that, but to be wildly governed by your intuition. How do you operate in those two spaces?
I don't know. It's a really weird thing, because I'm confident in a way that is I can't tell you if the chicken and egg of it. I can't tell you if I'm confident in my intuition and that the mission is on point because that's been proven true, or if I think of it as like a tuning fork. I think that we each have maybe more than one tuning fork, but let's just say that professionally or how we are in the world is a tuning fork.
Yep.
And you know when it's vibing, like you know when you're hitting, when it just feels like you're in this whatever it is.
Yep.
And you know, there are times when my intuition is way off. Like I've made some really, I mean, I've failed magnificently and been wrong, but not in about the big things. And part of it is I still, and again, this may seem really archaic right now, given the world, the way that the world is. I still see the best in people. I still believe that people are curious. I still believe that people appreciate beautiful, crafted things. Like the same way that I look at crafting a story, I could look at whoever created this cup. I can look at whoever invented this technology. There is a craftsmanship that I think is really beautiful. And I still think that things need to be imbued with care. The way that the world is going, is particularly south of the border, chills me, and I'm not so sure. But I'd still rather be on this side than on that side.
Makes sense.
Let's just say that I didn't vote correct. I didn't vote in the prevailing way because I'm a dual citizen. I did not vote for the person who won the U.S. election. And it wasn't until Naheed Menshi that I actually ever voted for a candidate that won an election. So there you go.
You never know.
You never know. And yeah, so it's interesting, right? Like, I don't know. It's just, I just see it.
It's fascinating to me.
But part of it too is paying attention. So, I mean, what is the word? I'm very online. And I'm pretty, I go to a lot of sites. I listen to a lot. I follow a lot of people. I was a very early Twitter person. I've been a very early Blue Sky person. I love subculture. The early internet was made for somebody like me, because it's like, where do you go and indulge all your passions? I was just telling my daughter the other day, I also love soap operas. So at one point, which I didn't tell you, I got offered a job writing for soap operas in New York because I love soap operas so much. And I actually wrote a cold letter to the producer of my favorite soap opera, and he met me. Because I guess people don't do that, or maybe he could just tell that I really love soap operas and knew a lot about soap operas. But when I was working so hard at ESPN, I was watching this soap opera called The Guiding Light, and there was a couple on the soap opera called Danny and Michelle, and they became known as Manny. And I ended up on a soap opera message board with a whole bunch of women from all over North America that loved Manny. And we actually met in St. Louis at a convention. It's nuts. Boy, isn't that crazy?
Yes. But it fits.
It fits, right? You're going, okay.
It's the way it is. After Swerve, what'd you do?
I turned down really good jobs. I turned down a bunch of, at one point I was asked to be the startup editor of Sportsnet magazine. I turned it down. Then I was asked to become the creative directors of all of Rogers magazines. I turned that down. I took the job instead to keep me in Calgary to be the Western editor of the Globe and Mail. Very bad fit. Very bad fit. So I lasted at that for a year. And then I started to try to figure out what I was going to do. I was writing about, I was playing poker. I was playing a lot of poker. So I was, playing a lot of poker.
Sounds like you played a lot of poker.
I was playing a lot of poker at Cash Casino. Have you ever been to Cash Casino?
No.
You really have to go. So talk about your subculture. The live poker scene in Calgary is quite the subculture and fascinating for me. So my father had been a compulsive liar and a compulsive gambler. And I wanted to understand my father. And so I started playing poker. And then I was writing about it, trying to figure out if there was a book in it. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you at a poker table. I feel like that would be a...
Yeah, so I've been so what I'm doing now though, which is really interesting, is I've decided to teach women how to play poker. So I'm taking 10 women at a time and I'm teaching them how to play
You're
No
like
Limit Texas Hold'em.
way in.
And it's like I'm sending all these women out into the world now playing poker.
Arming them.
Yeah. Alex is one of my pupils.
No
And she
way.
went to Vegas and she won in her first tournament. So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah. And then very quickly, I ended up, I had done a lot of hosting at WordFest. I'd written about WordFest or packaged stories about WordFest for Swerve. WordFest was in trouble and they needed somebody who could get their 20th anniversary festival off the ground. I put my hand up and said, how hard could that be? And I'm 10 years later, that's where I am. And it's just a magazine in 3 dimensions. It's Vox, it's ESPN, it's Cosmopolitan, it's 17, it's Swerve. Come alive. That's all it is.
It's taken all these things you figured out, been around, and now you packaged it up here.
Yeah.
To do that in Calgary, like to put all those pieces together.
Yeah.
Does it feel like, obviously it's a decade later, does it
Calgary's
fit?
so interesting because, obviously I'm playing for the big leagues. I always play for the big leagues. So I'm doing it for Calgary, but I'm paying attention because a lot of the authors that we bring in are in, big cities. They're big time authors. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that we're doing it better. And we are. And so the thing about Calgary that separates Calgary from other places is no one will ever say no to you. They won't make it easy for you, but they'll never stop you. And I love that. So it's up to you to figure it out. And so I wanted to do it differently. Again, you wouldn't put me into something, if you wanted like an author reading with a bunch of fiction authors, I'm not your girl. I know it's like forever.
Will you write a book eventually?
Do you want me to?
I don't read, but like listening to this, it seems like, there's a reason.
I have 2 titles for my book.
Oh, so you've been thinking about it?
Oh, no, I actually, I got a book deal. Sorry, I got a book deal. And then I gave my money back, which again is not, anyway, that's another story.
Yes.
So the one title is Dead Money.
Mm-hmm.
And Dead Money at a poker. Do you play poker?
I'm like dangerous with my knowledge about it, yeah.
So obviously Dead Money is somebody who's in the pot that has no business being there because it's just dead money and you don't know when to stop. So that's one. And the other one would be a more personal book called If I'd Known You Better, I Wouldn't Have Swallowed.
Do both, please.
I thought I could make you blush.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Thanks for doing this.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Alex, obviously, for doing the intro. What I find fascinating is just like there's characters like you that live in our city.
I love that I'm a character.
That's what I find like really interesting because I think, again, no research, not knowing anything about you, to actually like hear the story of how this all kind of played out, it's insane.
You're a fantastic listener, and there's a reason why people tell you things. So thank you for. I feel great, and I think that's a gift. So thank you.
Yeah, and when before we sat down, you're like, so what is it? Where's it going to go? And when I say I don't do any research, some people get a little confused about that and either feel disrespected or just like, well, what are we going to talk about if he knows nothing about me? That's the reason I don't is because of this. I just let this thing roll and it just goes, which is it's some very interesting conversations.
Good.
You kind of alluded to this earlier, but the Calgary. I end this thing with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
One handshake away from everything.
That is cool. It's the truth.
Yeah, it really is.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Really cool to now know you. Have some context on you. I really much appreciate your time.
You're so welcome.